Hey everybody, this is Eric Bond, the founder of beatthegmat.com, and welcome to the Write Like an Expert series. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this series, we are inviting top MBA admissions experts to break down the application essays for this year's top MBA programs. And joining us today is Ann Obsitnik. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Ann. And Ann is going to be helping us in breaking down this year's Haas MBA application essays. Just a little bit of information about Ann and who she is. So Ann, like all the other admissions experts we had in this series, has a fantastic pedigree. She graduated from Vanderbilt with a BA in English Literature. So hopefully there'll be some questions coming in from folks who have fuzzy majors and how that sort of translated to MBA programs. She went on to get her MBA at Kellogg, and she's had a very cool career. So she started off in advertising and primarily worked with a number of clients in consumer products. So your SC Johnsons, Quakers, your Unilevers, and so forth. And after graduating from Kellogg, she went on to work at Intuit. So that's a company that's close to my heart. That's where I started my career. And she worked on the Quicken brand, serving as a product manager, worked in development and product marketing, a whole slew of roles at Intuit. And then after Intuit, went on to the startup world, working in companies like Eve.com as well as Dialpad.com. So, Ann, welcome to this series, and it's nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. So what's going to happen next, folks, is we're going to be back in just a couple seconds. Ann and I are going to switch to slideshow view so we can actually get this presentation kicked off. So stick with us, and we'll be back in just a few seconds. Thanks so much. Hey folks, we're back, and for those of you who are just joining us, we're speaking with Ann Obsitnik. She is an MBA admissions expert with Stacy Blackman Consulting, and today she's going to be walking us through the top essays, the MBA admissions essays for the Haas School of Business. So Ann, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. I'm really happy to be talking to you about Haas today. I think that they have a really interesting application and certainly an interesting set of essays that are, as we'll discuss, a little bit different than some of the other schools' essays typically are. So I'm glad to be talking to you about them because I think there are some interesting observations to make. We've already kind of gone through this. I did just want to say I've been an admissions consultant with Stacy Blackman since 2006, so I'm currently in the middle of my 5th season working with the company, helping people attain their dream of going to business school. But I think Eric went through the rest of my background, so I don't want to belabor the point here. I want to kind of dive right into everything for Haas's essays. So let's start at the top. What matters most to Haas? So if you've been on their website, if you've read through the application, there are really 4 key tenets that Haas says they're looking for in a candidate. Question the status quo, confidence without attitude, student always, and beyond yourself. And I just, for the purpose of really getting into this, want to go through these each briefly and talk to you about what we think these mean. Questioning the status quo. It's not just being contrary, although as the dean of Haas Business School said, this is Berkeley after all. It is a history of, there's a history of kind of questioning the status quo at the school. It's part of the fabric of the place. But I think what this more specifically means to Haas is high-impact leadership, meaning someone who wants to come into an organization and not just kind of follow what has always happened in that organization. They actually want to look at things in a new way and lead a team down a new path. Having an entrepreneurial mindset, always thinking of the next idea. How can we do this differently? Is there anything new we can do? Having that vision, having initiative, and having creative ability when you're looking at a current situation and when you're thinking about what you could do with that situation down the road. Talking about confidence without attitude, I would actually say this is, from conversations that I know Stacy has had with people at the school, this is a pretty huge thing to them. They want you to be a leader. They want you to be confident. They want you to be smart and assertive. But they really do not look for any candidates who are not team players. There is a huge spirit of collaboration at Haas and a huge focus on respect for others. It's the whole show me you're great, don't tell me you're great attitude, total team orientation. So as you're going through your essays, please keep this in mind because it is an enormous part of what they look at. Student always, I think we all know what this means. It's just constant mindset of always learning, always moving forward in your intellectual growth, showing a great amount of self-awareness in terms of what you do know and what you don't know. And then lastly, beyond yourself, again, I think that this is a very Berkeley type of characteristic, but it's being really community-oriented and really being kind of a citizen of the world. And these are the four key tenets that they really want to see in their candidates. So just please, as we're going through this, keep this in the back of your mind because it's it's their cornerstones. There are four cornerstones. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit just about essays overall. I know some of you have probably joined the previous sessions, and you know that with essays you really have to show that you possess their desired qualities. You don't tell them that. And actually, I would go further. I would say that you actually need to engage and involve them. There's a Chinese proverb that says, "Tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I may remember. Involve me and I'll understand." Well, so how do you involve the admissions committee? That's really what you're trying to do, is not only just show, but involve them. How do you do that? Well, ideally, you want to come up with stories that involve them, that engage them in something other than just a very professional way. Your stories need to involve a certain amount of conviction and passion and emotion to draw them in. And I don't mean anything crazy or dramatic, but I do mean that talking about and conveying who you are as a person really can hook a person on the adcom. It can make them remember you. Don't be afraid to pepper your essays with this type of conviction and passion and emotion, and to really draw them in and involve them in your essays. Kind of my last overall thing that I want to say about essays overall is I encourage you to really create kind of a patchwork quilt of experiences that you've plucked from various stages and phases and experiences in your life. Don't just focus on work in all of your essays. What you want to do is take a collection of all the essays you have, and when you piece them together, you do see a common thread, you see a story, but you also see a very well-rounded, multidimensional person. So you want to make sure that the whole collection of your essays demonstrates the whole you. So sit down with any essay you're doing for any school and make sure that you represented various aspects of who you are, various times in your life, various sides of you, personal, professional, extracurricular, etc. That's a well-rounded person. And that's what schools are looking for, particularly Haas. Okay, let's jump into essay one. We're starting the series of 250-word essays. So obviously, as those of you working on these already know, this is not very much space whatsoever. 250 words goes by in a flash. So you really have to crystallize your thoughts, be as concise as you can about your experiences, and make sure that you get to the important stuff quickly. And we'll talk about what that important stuff is. So what are you most passionate about and why? All right. This essay in particular, I think, leaves the door open for your personal experiences in life versus your professional. When you're talking about passion, you may have passion in your work, and I think that's great if you do. But I do think that this is an essay that gives this adcoms an opportunity to see a deeper side of you. So think about really what are you most passionate about, and be honest. Don't say what you think they want to hear. Say what you're truly honest, what you're honestly passionate about in life. Our bullet one here, keep a pencil by your bed, is that sometimes people overthink this. They really overthink, well, what do they want to see? What should I convey about myself that they will like? We suggest to our clients that you set your alarm for 3 a.m. and you basically write down what comes to your mind at 3 a.m. This is a tactic for trying to keep you from overthinking it. Coming up with this idea at 3 a.m. may help you not to overthink it. Okay, talking about the third bullet point, what does not matter as much as why. This is something that I could probably universally say for almost every essay you're going to write. What you're writing is not as important as why you're writing it and how you're going to explain to us why you feel how you feel. Your passion could be for an activity. It could be for a group that you're in. It could be for a cause. It could be for a hobby. But you need to say why you're passionate about it, and you need to use examples of how you've utilized this passion in your life and why it's important to you. Ultimately, what you're passionate about is going to be about values in your life. You are passionate about things that you value the most. So don't forget this, and make sure that it seems authentic to you as you're writing. Because if you're writing about something that doesn't seem to be a value to you and doesn't seem to be something you're passionate about, it's going to be very transparent to AdCom. Again, don't forget to tell us why you feel this way and to use concrete examples. This essay doesn't have to be about saving the world. It can be, like I said, about a hobby. It could be about a personal belief that you have. It can be about personal connections that you have. But just do back up what you say with examples. Okay, moving on to essay number 2. Tell us about your most significant accomplishment. Okay. Anytime that you read the question, tell us about a time or describe an experience, that's a key for working within a certain structure to get a certain experience across. And we use a framework that we call STAR. You may have heard of it. It stands for Situation, Task, Action, and Result. And basically, that's the way that you would approach a question where you're conveying an experience. So you set up by setting up the situation. Very briefly, you've got 250 words. So setting up the situation and then setting up the task that needed to be done has to happen very early in your essay, and you need to get to it really quickly. You want to focus most of your time on action and then even more of your time on the result. What happened as a result of what you accomplished or what of this most significant accomplishment. It's very easy for like the engineers, the finance people to get mired in this because we forget that because some of the details of the situation and the task were interesting and were unusual. But the problem is that you take too much time talking about that and you never get to what AdCom really wants to hear, which is what action you decided to take as a result of the situation you were in, and especially what the result of your action was. And I always tell people if your accomplishment has anything to do, it may or may not, because it could be more of a personal accomplishment, but if it has anything to do with numbers or results where you can actually say, this changed by X percent, or this many, people that I tutored actually went on to go to high school, or whatever the number is, use the number because that's your result, and stats support success, and what you want to show here is success. Be sure to mention why this is significant and meaningful to you. Why is this accomplishment your most significant accomplishment? They want to hear this. This is, again, about values, because if this is the greatest thing you've done in your life, they want to know why that is the case. And, again, the scale of the accomplishment here is not as important as why it's important to you. So it could be that it was a very small project and it really didn't have a great something at work, let's say, that didn't have a great dollar outcome, but you really improved a process at work that was really failing, and it really led X number of people to have a completely reduced workflow as a result of just this project you did. So don't get mired in thinking, oh my gosh, it's only $10,000 that I saved, or whatever. It's really why this was important to you and why it was significant that matters. Okay, moving on to essay 3. And we're still in the 250-word essays, so we're still keeping these short and concise. At Haas, our distinctive culture is defined by 4 key principles. We've already talked about these. Question the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. Give an example of when you have demonstrated one of these principles. Okay, the first bullet point is key here. Be specific in linking to one of these principles. I think that there are times that students read this question and think, or not students, applicants read this question and think, I actually could do 2 of these, and maybe I'll try to do 2 of them. That's not what they're asking. They specifically asked for you to link to one of them. So please do just link to one and do it well. This is a great essay to show them that you're one of them through one of these 4 key tenets. And so I would say look at all settings in your life. Look at professional, look at personal, look at extracurricular. Find the one that seems to hook best to one of these 4 key principles and use that example. I remind you here that Haas is exceptionally collaborative. They're incredibly team-oriented. It is not a competitive culture, student to student. They want good team players, and this is a big part of their assessment of you. So, if at any point in any of these, obviously confidence with that attitude is very important to them. But you can get across your team orientation and your collaborative skills through any of these principles, really. And just do keep that in mind, because it's probably one of the key, most important things that they look for in a student. Let's see. Let's move on to Essay 4. There are many ways to learn about our program. What steps have you taken to learn about the Berkeley MBA? Okay, so this is a really interesting question to me, as is, I think, the last question. So Haas really puts it out there for you. They tell you exactly what type of student they're looking for. They tell you how important it is by the fact that these are essay questions, that Essay 3 and 4 are here. They're giving you a key indication of what they're looking for. Essay 4 particularly, they have a very distinctive culture at Haas. They're looking for a candidate who wants to go there, not the candidate who didn't get into Stanford or Harvard. They will not admit you if they feel that you are disingenuous in your interest or that you haven't done their homework on their school, and they're putting it down as an essay question. So obviously, this is not a typical question for business schools to ask. They're asking this specifically because they want to see that you have learned about them. There are a bunch of different things you can do. You need to definitely go beyond the basics, such as the website and an info session. You can do some of the work on campus if you're able to, going to the school and visiting, making sure that you sit in some classes. There are often visiting days at campuses where they'll even set you up in a classroom, but there are also ways through the admissions office to get information about how you can sit in on various courses that you're interested in, or sit on professors that you're interested in listening to. You can attend student socials with prospective students, other prospective students, and current students. You can, while you're on campus, you can contact ahead of time some club leaders and say, I'm interested in the Entrepreneurial Venture Club. Do you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to sit down with me, another student who maybe is president or heading up that club? So there's a lot of things you can do to show interest and to engage with the campus if you're going to go to the campus itself. For some people, this isn't possible. Maybe if you're applying from a different country or just do not have the time to make it to Berkeley, make sure that you go to the info sessions in your city if they're coming there. Find alums. Contact the alumni club. Ask them if there are some people who are willing to speak with you about admissions in a particular field that you're interested in. Research professors. Get to know what they're talking about. What are kind of the buzz subjects that the school is really focusing on? Really do your homework. I can't stress for Haas how important this is. It's important for every school, but it is not common for a school to actually put this in their essay. They're giving you a clear indication that they really want a person who wants to go to Haas. Okay, now we'll move on to essay 5, and now we're getting into this is a 500-word maximum essay. So more words just means that they know that they're really focused on learning about your leadership skills. They're giving you more space in which to convey it, and they're going to spend extra time reading it. So this is a key essay for them, obviously. Again, this is an essay that says, give us an example of a situation in which you have displayed leadership. So you can use the STAR format here: situation, task, action, result. Remember to focus on, more specifically, on the actions you took, and more importantly, the result, versus setting up the situation and the task. As you discuss your leadership experience, or as you're even selecting which leadership experience to use, consider Haas's key principles. The 4 principles we talked about: questioning the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. Make sure that your leadership example is hitting most of these, if not all of these, okay? Because that is what they're going to be looking for. Consider, again, every setting. There are a lot of early career applicants who are not going to have really meaty leadership examples from work. You can pull them from any area of your life. You can pull them from even a personal. I had a client who pulled it from a personal area of his life. I've had people pull it from extracurricular activities, from college. So consider really every stage of your life, whatever really hits those 4 key principles and the idea of leadership hardest. So again, here the scale is really not as important as the substance. So I don't want you to feel, like we talked about in the previous essay, I don't want you to feel as if it's too small of an example of leadership. If you feel like, it was a small project and maybe it was a small team, but it really changed the results it changed the outcome, it changed the actions of other individuals. That's what you're looking for. And actually, I want to kind of, on this essay, stress, make particular note of the fact that you really should not be confused about what leadership is. I find that when I'm working with many of my clients, they are confused about what we mean by leadership here. It's not management. This is not about your ability to manage. It's about your ability to lead. It's not a question about your greatest accomplishment either. This is not a solo act. This is about leadership, which includes guiding other people. It does not have to be an official title that you had. It could be more informal, but it does need to involve you leading other people to a successful conclusion. There is an essay that Stacy Blackman and some of her associates wrote about leadership and within the context of the MBA application. And one of the quotes that I love is that the best leadership essays will have heroes other than you. You brought out someone's potential, educated them, or steered them to do the right thing. So think about those types of things when you're thinking about your leadership example. Another quote that I've kind of mentioned, but I want to bears mentioning again, is define the leadership challenges you faced, not the management challenges that you faced. There's a difference there. Leadership has to do with people. Management has to do with tasks. So do please, in this essay, make sure that you're focusing on your leadership of others. Okay, Now we'll move on to the longest essay you're going to be writing, 1,000 words, and it's a multi-part question. What are your post-MBA short-term and long-term career goals? How do your professional experiences relate to these goals? How will an MBA from Berkeley help you achieve these specific career goals? Okay, so first, and this is like kind of a pet peeve of mine, so I'm just going to say it because I'm praying that everybody will listen to me on this. A big piece of advice that I have on a multi-question essay like this is stick to the order. Admissions committee people do not want to search for the answer to these questions buried in various places throughout the 1,000-word essay. They don't want to search through a long narrative to come up with the answers to these questions, nor do they want to jump around within the text of your essay to find the answer. So please answer the questions in the order they're asked. I'm not trying to suggest that there isn't room for creativity in these essays. There certainly is. But remember, this is a business school application. You're not a journalist. You are writing for a business school application, and you need to answer the questions as posed in the order they're posed. So that is the first piece of advice I want to give about this. Secondly, a key bullet here, explain how business school fits as a bridge between point A and point C. So you're here in point A today. You want to get to your short and long-term goals at point C, and point B is going to be Haas. Why do you need business school? Why do you need Haas? It's a bridge to get you somewhere. There are a lot of people who have a lot of long-term and short-term goals that really don't require business school. And what they're looking for are the people who really do, who really need that training and who really need that context and who need that network and who need that, in some cases, incubation that a business school provides. So I can't stress that enough. For many of you, it may seem that your future goals don't really possibly relate to your past experiences. So, one of the key things we say, though, is you do need to make sure that when you're talking about switching careers and saying what your long-term and short-term goals are, you have to make sure that you're talking about what skills you're going to be drawing upon from your prior career, your current career, and what is your source of inspiration for these short and long-term goals. So, for example, if you're a professional baseball player or amateur baseball player, I don't know, and you now want to be an entrepreneur, give us an idea. I mean, that's a big change. Give us an idea of what inspired the change. Talk about the things that you learned from being on the baseball team that translate to entrepreneurship. Maybe the concept of never giving up, tweaking things that aren't working every day, etc. There's always going to be ways to make your past experiences relevant to your future goals. And that is what you do need to do, is make it all fit, make it all flow. Your resume could be all over the place, and you may feel like it's a drastic change, but you're going to need to have that story that flows. A lot of people ask me, when it comes to short and long-term goals, do I really have to be specific? Can I just say that I generally want to move into finance? Well, the way I feel is that every other applicant is going to have some directional specificity to their goals. Okay, they're not going to say just, well, in general, I want to go into marketing, or in general, I want to, be an entrepreneur. You have to go beyond that. You have to say, what industries you're interested in, and ultimately, what you want to do with that long-term goal in terms of, do you want to be working for yourself? Do you want to be heading up a major corporation, etc.? Give some directional specificity to this, because everybody else is going to be, and think about it from their standpoint. Like, if you think of the fact that you're in point A and you need to go to point C, and B is the highway that Haas is providing, if you really can't say that you want to go to point C, why do you need a highway? So, keep that in mind. They're looking for the people who do know what they want to do and who do have ideas about that. They may change their mind. They may tinker with it, they may tweak it as time goes on, but they do have an idea of where they want to go. And they want to hear, Haas will want to hear some specificity from you. Lastly, I will make this point again. They do need to see that Haas, not Harvard, not Kellogg, not Stanford, is necessary for you to get there. So it's not just any business school that will do it. It's Berkeley that you need to go to. So, and they're asking you specifically, how will an MBA from Berkeley help you achieve these specific career goals? Okay, so do focus on that in this essay. Okay. We'll move on to Essay 7. Now, this is an optional essay, and I think there are people who are probably watching right now who feel like, well, I need this essay because I maybe had a low GPA in college that I'd like to explain, or I have gaps in experience on my resume and I want to explain those, or I wasn't able to get my current supervisor to write, or I didn't select my current supervisor to my recommendation, so I need to explain that. But there are those of you out there who don't have a situation like that, who think, oh gosh, I've already written 6 different essays or X number of essays. I don't need to do this. Well, I would say really think twice about this. It isn't required, but it's important. It's an opportunity that many schools don't offer. They're giving you a chance, and they're willing to read it, to say something or convey something that's so unique and so unusual about you that it hasn't come up in this application, and it maybe hasn't come up in other applications you've done as well. And this could be something like a talent or skill that isn't front and center but is very important to you, or a hobby, or something that happened in your family that was really life-changing for you, that really opened your eyes, any kind of event that changed your life. Something that is going to further dimensionalize you and, again, involve them in your story. Not just tell them, not just show them, but involve them in your story. So I do really, really recommend that everybody consider this, and it's 500 words maximum, so they are giving you some space to talk about this. Do consider doing it. It does also, I believe, show additional effort on your part within the context of the application. So I think probably we'll move on to Q&A. I did want to mention to you guys that StacyBlackman.com, we do offer, Stacy Blackman Consulting does offer free consultations. You can go onto our website and give us your information, and we'll be in touch with you. We're happy to provide a free consultation to you. And I found for a lot of my clients that, there are people who do a consultation and don't move on with SBC, but there are people who have, and they found the initial consultation to be incredibly helpful. Also, other resources for you, the website, StacyBlackman.com, Stacy's blog. Also, new this year are some essay guides that Stacy wrote, and unfortunately, right now, we do not have the Haas essay guides ready, but they're fabulously helpful essay guides that are, in print, and we're offering a 10% discount to all the people that come purchase them through Beat the GMAT, and you can enter the promo code TREAT10 if you're interested in that.
Great.
And so I think we're ready for Q&A.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for that presentation. And it's been about 2 years since I last seen the Haas essays, and I'm shocked and baffled again by how tough they are. So I hope that in the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to have a Q&A session with Anne Upsitnik, who is an MBA admissions expert with Stacy Blackman Consulting. We're going to be back in just a couple seconds, but highly encourage you to use this time to get your questions in, and Anne will do her best to answer as many of them live. So back in just a couple seconds. Okay, folks, and we're back, and we are speaking with Anne Upsitnik, who is an MBA admissions expert with Stacy Blackman Consulting. For those of you who just joined us, Anne just did a terrific walkthrough of this year's Haas MBA application essays. And now she's going to be sticking around for about 20 minutes or so to answer your questions live. So type in your questions right now and let's get started. So first question is coming in from Sandeep on Facebook. And he's asking, what do you do in the case where my essay, and he's referring to the most significant accomplishment essay, clashes with a leadership essay? And I guess to extract that at a higher level, what happens when you have an example of an experience that could fit perfectly two essays? Is that something that's acceptable?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that it is acceptable for two essays, or that it works for two essays, is fine. But you certainly can't use the same example. Basically, I think you just have to make an assessment as to which it's stronger for. Do you have another example within some other area of your life, or another example that you think will work okay for one of them, and that this current example that you're talking about works fabulously for the leadership essay or for the greatest accomplishment? But I would definitely not use the same example for two of your essays. That is really a lost opportunity, actually. You want to show more of a multidimensional side of yourself. You want to show that there's a richness to your background and your experiences, and that you have a lot to draw upon. So I would certainly make sure that you pick the essay that particular experience works best for, and figure something else out for the other essay.
So sort of in the spirit of recycling experiences, but what are your thoughts about recycling essays in general between schools? So the thing that I think is so unique about Haas is that the application and its essays, they're so specific to Haas. I'd say more so than any other business school application is to the business school itself. Do you have any suggested strategies for how people can recycle perhaps some content that they wrote for other schools for this Haas application?
Well, interestingly, you're right in that, first of all, Haas is looking for a very specific kind of student, and they really have very carefully crafted their essay questions to try to get at that, to try to find the student that really fits into Haas, that also really wants to go to Haas. And so there are going to be some aspects of their application that you just aren't going to be able to recycle. However, experiences are totally recyclable. So, when you're writing about your greatest accomplishment, there are probably several places in which that could be inserted, maybe rewritten, maybe tinkered with a little bit in terms of wordsmithing, but there are definitely other places that you're going to be able to use that example. Sometimes you can even convert like a greatest accomplishment essay into I don't know, for some people it might be a mistake that I made and how I corrected it, or something, one of the greatest lessons I learned, or you can really kind of switch the angle on some of these essays so that you're using the same example, you're just tweaking it a bit and taking it through a different lens and using it again. I think probably there are about two essays here with Haas that they are not going to be able to recycle. I think the others you should be able to, with a different approach and a different spin, use quite a bit of your content.
Right. And I can actually inject a little bit of personal color to this as well. So I had actually applied to Haas about 2 years ago, and I got accepted. But for this application, I actually wrote every single essay from scratch, even though I'd done 3 prior. And the reason why was I discovered that when I tried to recycle myself the content, it was sort of forcing a square peg into a round hole, in the sense that I just felt like it didn't come off as sincere. It felt like I was clearly taking another school's essay and just shaping it to be a little bit more Haas looking. And
right.
So, it took a lot of work, and I was completely miserable. But I was, at the end of the day, I was very happy that I started taking the extra time to just write from scratch. And on a personal note, I usually just suggest that to people if they have the time, is, if you can do it from scratch, it's probably better, because you're going to come out with a much more custom product.
I agree, and I do agree with that, but I also think that there are ways that certainly you can recycle the ideas.
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure that I made clear in my last statement, I'm not saying that you're cutting and pasting. You are rewriting.
Right.
Because if the question is about learning from a mistake versus a greatest accomplishment, you could be using the same example, but you're clearly going to have to rewrite around that. But I do think that there are the key stories that people have in your life that are going to be the key stories that you use over and over again throughout these applications. You are going to have to customize them enough so that it doesn't feel like the round, the square peg in the round hole.
Right, exactly. So another question coming in from, I'm going to screw up this name, so my apologies in advance. Rhiannon on Facebook is asking, should experiences displayed in essays really be limited to the past 3 years? So how far back can you go in these essays to pull examples?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to say that probably if you're thinking about professional experiences, obviously there's a certain percentage of your whole application package that should be focused really on, your professional life, and your essays should probably focus on largely the most recent work experience you have. We're all supposed to be growing and bettering ourselves in our careers and progressing in our careers. So obviously the most impactful stuff that you've done is going to be within the last 3 years, or hopefully it is. But I would not say that overall, when you're talking about personal experiences, college, extracurricular, et cetera, that you really are limited to 3 years. I would say no. I have had people talk about experiences as young as 7 years old in their applications, and they were relevant because it showed a pattern in your life, a pattern of maybe being interested in a certain thing or being a certain way. Maybe it was an experience that changed your life forever that happened so long ago, but it really developed and confirmed who you were in your life. So I would say, when it comes to work experiences, yes, you do want to make sure the largest part of your experience is focused on the last few years. But when you're talking about personal experiences, no, as long as you're telling a story with that experience about you and about what that particular experience did for your life or changed for you, it's perfectly fine to go back a number of years.
We're speaking with Ann Upsitnik. She is an MBA admissions consultant with Stacy Blackman Consulting, and she is currently taking questions about Haas. So write them in right now, and we'll answer them live. Another question is coming in on Facebook from Murphy, and this is a clarification on, I think, something that you mentioned. The question is, should your significant accomplishment be work-related? Or maybe another way to frame this is it preferred by admissions to be work-related versus something personal?
Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I think what this is all about is the balance. If you look at all the essays that you're doing for Haas, you need to make sure that you have a certain, I hate to say percentage because that sounds so formal, but you do want to have an allocation of attention that is focused on your work experience. But that said, you also want to be well-rounded. You want to seem well-rounded and pull experiences from other aspects of your life. It is completely up to you how you decide to allocate that. Maybe the greatest accomplishment could be, something from work. Maybe it's not. But I do think that you want to have a balance, overall. So if you have for one of these essays, you have a wonderful non-work example, I think that's perfectly fine. And it doesn't really matter which one it is, except, of course, the ones that are work-related or professionally related questions. But I think you just want to make sure that overall your package of essays looks balanced.
And so another question is coming in from Sweta, and I really like this one. This relates to the question is, does the style and structure of the material matter a lot? How do we show rather than tell?
So what I would say is the best way to show rather than tell is, and I think when we say not to tell someone, it's not to say, I am good at this and I am good at that and I did this and I did that. It's to weave a story into it, to kind of almost, without with still being concise, to kind of give examples. So if you're saying, let's say, I'm trying to think of an example. Let me look at the list of stuff that, what you're most passionate about, for example. You could talk a little bit, you could say, I am most passionate about books because I like to read books and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so it's very, that you're telling someone. Showing them would be talking about maybe, as a small child, what your experience with books was, and maybe there was something that happened in your life that books provided an escape for you, and that throughout your life you maybe worked at a library and as a volunteer, and you did X, Y. So you're showing me your passion. Mm-hmm. You're not telling me you're passionate about it and being very cursory about it. You're showing me through examples. You're showing me through a story of your life. That's what I think we mean. And when I talk about going further than that and involving it, it's to talk about how that makes you feel. Passion is supposed to be emotional. So telling us how that makes you feel and what it has done for your psyche is important in this essay. And that's what really involves the admissions committee, is that they feel an emotional hook to you because you've shared that with them.
Right. I think one of the toughest things about these Haas essays is that whole principle around confidence without attitude. And from what I've seen personally, Haas takes that very, very seriously. I mean,
do.
When we went to the orientation, when I speak to other students, they mention that all the time. And it's sort of, in some ways, it presents a very unique challenge because, on the one hand, you want to be bragging to some degree about how great you are when you're writing an application. You're trying to, in some manner, impress other people. On the other hand, what is your perspective on this? Just to clarify the issue, do you have to play more subtext? Is it? Can you not directly say I
think it's okay to share facts. Like, for example, if you're sharing an accomplishment and your greatest accomplishment, and let's say that does involve something at work that had to do with numbers, and you got a certain result from it that was fabulous, I don't think that's boasting. That's sharing facts, right? I think what they're talking about, though, is that usually success comes as a team. And I think the more that, remember, as I quoted from Stacy, that every great leadership story has another hero. It turns other people into heroes.
Right.
So I think one way that you can do that is to talk about the success of the team and to talk about the fact that you were so happy that your actions allowed, Susie in accounting to spend half the time that she used to on this particular spreadsheet, or whatever it is. You're basically discussing your successes as they relate to others and as they improve others' lives and others' situations. So I totally agree with you. It is a delicate balance, but I think there's a way of talking about your success as it relates to the organization and the success of the organization, mm-hmm. or the success of a group, the success of a friend you were working with. It just depends on the story, but how it impacted others positively.
Right.
And that's not boastful.
Gotcha. Okay, I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions here. Another question coming in from Rhiannon on Facebook is, who do you recommend having review your essays, and how many people?
Mm-hmm. I get this question a lot. It is always good to have people review your essays. When I applied to business school, I actually had 2 friends of mine who had actually attended business school, one had gone to, I think, University of Chicago, and one had gone to Wharton. I had them review my applications. So first of all, I think it's very important that you have someone who's used to reviewing business school, or at least has written business school applications, review your application. Mm-hmm. Because if you ask someone else to do it, they're not going to understand the nuances of the application. They haven't been through it before. They may not understand that, the content, it has to be that rather than it being beautiful narrative, that you really have to get to the point, and you have to have these 3 things checked off your list by the end. So I would say definitely find someone, whether it's an alumni that you know or a current student that you know at a business school, have someone who's gone through the process before review your essays. I'd say if you want to have someone check grammar at the end, fine, have someone who has exceptional grammar skills, check it, but tell them that you're not looking for content, any kind of content feedback. You're just looking for a grammatical check.
Right.
I also recommend that you limit the number of people that you have review your essays to probably 1 or 2 people. It just starts to get to be overwhelming. Everybody's going to have a different opinion, and there's a certain point where you'll see with 2 people, let's say, whether there's a consistency in their feedback. Well, you're not hitting leadership hard enough, or I'm not really seeing the team orientation here. It's still talking just too much about you. And you'll start to see some consistency. It's going to become very confusing if you bring more people than that into it. It's just too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right. Great advice. Okay. So I like this question. I was asking actually in a previous session, which is, what do you do to address a gap in your career, let's say a few years, that was due to a relocation and also starting a family? So, a very common situation is when someone is coming from outside the United States and is being relocated with a spouse, oftentimes a visa prohibits them from finding a new job. And also, of course, family. When you have a baby, it makes complete sense to, it's a valid decision to be a full-time mom or full-time dad for a little while. In these cases, with clients that you've worked with, how do you sort of address that in your essays?
Yeah. So usually in most applications, there is some space, usually it's not as much as, Haas is really giving everybody an opportunity to say something additional about themselves. But in the Haas essay, for example, it's that last essay, number 7, which is the area that you would actually take this just head on, and you'd say, I want to address, in your essay, you'd say that you wanted to address the gaps in your employment, and you talk about the relocation, you talk about the raising the family. But I would also then segue that into the fact, maybe some of the things you learned from the relocation and from having a family that have made you potentially better candidates. There are so many wonderful things that you could say about, for example, moving from one place to another and how that switch in culture was such a learning experience that will make you that much more valuable as a student and a peer to a business school program. Same thing to be said about parenting. Parenting, I think, is the hardest job in the world and the world's greatest balancing act. And I think that you could use that, an opportunity in that Essay 7, for example, at Haas, to make it not only an explanation of that gap, but actually something that works for you, that shows a different side to you and shows kind of what a rich expanded experience you have had. There are areas in other applications, in most applications, there are areas where you can explain, they leave you a little space, not usually as long as what Haas does, but a little space to explain potentially a low GPA or potentially why you aren't having a certain recommender right for you. Maybe a supervisor write your recommendation, etc. And so I think if you go through the whole application, you'll find that most applications provide that. If they don't, I would actually just tag it. I would add it on to the back of my application and write a very short sentence about that. I wouldn't belabor it. I wouldn't go on for a page about it, but I would put a short paragraph together that explained that if they do not give you the opportunity. But most schools do. Great.
So I think we have time for one last question here, and I think this is one that you'll enjoy speaking to. So Lavinia from Facebook asks, how do you work with your clients as an admissions consultant?
How do we work with our clients? Well, we work well. We have a number of different ways that we work with clients. I do hourly work. So all of my clients are people who have decided that they only want to buy time from our consulting firm on an hourly basis. And I am sent information about them, and I kind of look at their resume. I'm matched with them, actually, based on their background and my background, if we think it's a complementary thing. Someone from Stacy's office sends that to me, and I review all the information, their resume sheet that we call a brag sheet, and which is all about their background. And usually we have a short, startup conversation just so I can get to know that person better and what their goals are, what schools they're hoping to apply to. Usually hourly purchases mean that they're already working on something and they want some specific help on maybe certain applications, certain essays. And then I usually work back and forth with them over the phone or via email on the essays and kind of commenting on a strategic level how I think they could improve them. I also do work with resumes. There's another way to work with Stacy Blackman Consulting, which is called comprehensive, which means that you actually are matched with a consultant that's appropriate for your background. You do a huge interview with them where we learn all about your background, your life, all the way back from childhood to current day, and kind of together develop this story and this strategy for your application package. Gives you a framework within which to approach every single application you're doing. That is a fixed fee, and for that fee you get unlimited help and access to your consultant. So those are the two different ways to work, and it's largely over email or over the phone, and can span as many schools as you want, or as few schools as you want.
Great. We have been speaking with Ann Upsitnik. She is an MBA admissions expert with Stacy Blackman Consulting. And in this hour, she has walked us through each of the essays for this year's Haas MBA application, as well as answered your questions live. So, Ann, thank you so much for your time and for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. This was great.
It's fantastic. So a couple of next steps here. Just want to let you guys know that if we weren't able to address your questions during this live session, you have two options. One is to go to stacyblackman.com. There's plenty of resources there where you can learn about everything there is to know about admissions, as well as to find contact information to speak with Stacy Blackman Consultant. And as Ann had, as Ann had mentioned, there is a free consultation opportunity. So highly encourage you to get the free advice at least. So that's stacyblackman.com. You can find all the information there. You also have the opportunity to ask your questions in the Ask Stacy forum in the Beat the GMAT community. It is a very, very active forum staffed by plenty of Stacy Blackman experts. In fact, it's perhaps one of the oldest running forums that we have on Beat the GMAT. So you can ask your questions there as well, and you will certainly receive some help. Thank you guys so much for attending today's Write Like an Expert series session. We have 2 more coming up next week, so be sure to check out the schedule and RSVP. And I guess we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.